Hey there, my amazing podcast family. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. But before I get into the interview with Carly, I wanted to take a quick second to remind everyone, in case you hadn't noticed, it's Black Friday this week. I can't believe we're already at this point in the year. It's kind of crazy. But why does this matter to you when you're listening to my podcast? Well, because I have a once a year sale that I do every year for Black Friday coming up. And I want to remind you, if you haven't taken a moment to get on my email list, you're going to want to go ahead and do that now. So go wherever you're listening or watching this video, in the description link, and go ahead and click on that to sign up for my VIP list so you get first notice of the once a year sale that I am doing for Black Friday and over the weekend and Cyber Monday. Each day, a new deal is going to drop and it's going to be available for 48 hours only. So make sure that you're on the list. I'm going to be posting about it on Instagram as well. So make sure you're following me there and watching my stories. Last year, I did some other discounts and things like that I found online to support the bridal hair and makeup community. So go ahead and make sure you're still following my stories as well. Other deals and things that I find online, I'm going to be sharing my links to those for you as well. Plus, you can get your hands on up to 50% off select trainings and resources inside of my coaching community. All right, so again, go ahead, sign up for the email list. Make sure you're following me on Instagram and checking my stories this weekend for Black Friday so you can save when we have slow season coming up and you're not doing as many in-person hair or makeup. It's a perfect opportunity to invest and put some time back into growing the business side of things while things are a little bit slower. Might as well save a bunch of money when doing that as well. All right, so are you ready? Let's get into today's conversation. As business owners, how often do we make business decisions based on what's good for us at the expense of the client experience? Welcome back to the Swears and Does Hair podcast. I'm your host, Sue Minsky, business coach for bridal hairstylists and makeup artists. And this week, we have a special guest. We have Carly from Carly Jo Makeup. And as a recent bride-to-be, I brought her on the show today to talk about how becoming the client has shifted her perspective and shifted how she has run her business since getting engaged. So thank you so much for joining me today, Carly. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here today because I think this is a really important topic that some people don't necessarily think of. You know, they think about setting boundaries and policies and all those kinds of things based on what's best for them as a business owner, and don't always take into account, well, how is this going to impact the client experience for the better or possibly for the worst? So I really wanted to bring you on because being a wedding vendor in the beauty industry, I thought, this gives you a really perfect perspective on putting yourself in the client's shoes and maybe making some changes and some impact to how you run your business. So first, before we dive into the conversation today, can you take a few seconds to introduce yourself to the audience in case somebody out there listening isn't familiar with who you are?
For sure. So like she said, I'm Carly from Carly Jo Makeup, and I am a makeup artist that specializes in weddings, special events, literally any other thing, based in Columbus, Ohio, but I go wherever my clients want me to be.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing makeup for weddings?
I've been doing it for 8 years. I've had my cosmetology license for about that much. Oh my God, really that long? That's crazy. That's a long time. Almost that long. I was trying to think has it really been 8 years since I've been doing makeup already?
Yeah, I feel that. So I just got my hair cut yesterday, and the girl who cuts my hair, she and I went to cosmetology school together. We went to Paul Mitchell, and she was like in the class one behind me. And we were both talking about it, and we're like, when did we graduate? What year was that? How long has it been? It's like, once I think you hit like 4 or 5 years, it just all kind of blurs. And you're like, I don't know, I'm just still in survival mode. I'm just like moving along.
Exactly. Yeah. I still feel like a 25-year-old, 17-year-old. So
yeah, some days I do too. And I'm 40. So I don't think that really ever goes away.
Okay, great.
Let's kind of dive into the topic today. First of all, Tell us a little bit about your engagement story. How long ago did you get engaged? How did he propose? All that fun stuff.
He's wonderful. So Ian is my fiance, and he
Uh-huh.
is big romantic. Neither of our dads really like proposed to our moms per se.
Uh-huh.
So he knew that he wanted there to be something. And even, I feel like a lot of people talk about engagement with their partner before they get engaged. And so
Yeah.
it was even like, hey, so like when we get engaged, I don't want it to be a scene, but I don't want it to be like just in our house or anything, things like that. But I also want it to be documented in some way. It can be a professional photographer, someone could be hiding in the bushes. I don't care. So what he did was he basically planned. Well, I kind of also planned this styled shoot per se. So
Uh-huh.
in June of last year, we were modeling for a styled shoot for a photographer. And as I was changing out of the wedding dress I was in, he went up to the photographer, Caroline, and he's like, hey, I want to plan a fake styled shoot for Carly and propose to her that way. Are you down? She's like, absolutely, let's do it. So
Oh, fun.
October, that photographer and I happened to be working a wedding together. And when I saw her, she's like, oh my God, I have a style shoot idea. You and Ian are the only couple that I can think of for it. And this is what it is. It's going to be like an outdoor picnic theme, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's not he's like any other guy. He's not the biggest fan of getting his photo taken. So he played it off like, okay, yeah, another style shoot. Cool, whatever. So it was November of last year. So November of 22 that we got engaged. And
Okay.
we went to this park around my parents' house, and we brought our dog first. We took some pictures with her, and then my mom
Uh-huh.
took her to her house. And there was a picnic basket with charcuterie and macaroons and pillows and all that stuff. And we were sitting down, and it was freezing. And I was under the blanket, and I was comfy cozy. We're taking pictures, and the photographer's like, "Okay, so get up and pretend you're slow dancing." And in my head, I'm like, "Could we have done this while we were like already standing?" Like that was the one thought I
Yeah.
had. And then we're pretending to slow dance. And he said, you remember for the last year and a half, I've told you how I know I'm going to propose. It's just a matter of when. And I'm like, yeah, the gears are not turning. I'm still what's going on because I'm in like model mode. Like we're at
Yeah.
a style shoot, blah, blah, blah. And then he has to physically motion to the setup for me to be like, oh, I dropped a lot of F that day. And we went to dinner with our families afterwards. So
Oh,
it
that's
was
so exciting.
amazing.
Yeah. My husband picked a really awkward time to propose. We'd always talked about, well, always, I'd say we've been dating for like 6 months at that point, but we'd known each other since high school.
Right.
And we'd been talking about, getting engaged or whatever. And that summer we had gone to the Cayman Islands and we were at like this jewelry store. And he like made some joke about, oh, while we're here, you want to try on engagement rings? And I was like, okay, sure. And so I put one on and I like stuck it in his face. I was like, memorize this or whatever. And little did I know that he went home and went to a jeweler and was like, I need something that looks like this or whatever. So then a couple of months later, I was visiting because we were like dating long distance. He was in South Carolina and I was in Connecticut. So I drove all the way down and I was visiting with him and we were watching old videos from high school. And he kept telling me all day, he's like, I have a surprise for you tonight. I have a surprise for you. And I was like, okay, whatever. And
Right.
then he waited until we were done watching movies. And I was like sobbing because I missed like all my friends from high school and I hadn't seen people in so long. And it was like 1:00 in the morning. So I'm like puffy faced and tired or whatever. And he's
Right.
like, okay, I have a scavenger hunt for you. And I was just like,
Right now?
it's 1 a.m. Like I'm tired. I just want to go to bed, And so I like went into the bathroom and I closed the door and there was this thing like on the mirror and it was like clue number 2. And I was just like, so I opened the door and he's like sitting on the bed and he's like, I have clue number 1 for you here. And like, it was this whole big thing. And I was just like, oh, I almost totally ruined this. I'm really sorry. I'm like, but also that was really awkward timing, babe. Like,
1 a.m. after I'm literally done sobbing and everything?
yeah, I was like, I don't get it. I was like really tired. I was like, I don't understand what you're doing right now. And he was like trying to make it this big whole romantic thing.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't get it, babe. I don't get it.
Even like, because in September, so Ian was getting his master's during that time. And in September, his school is based in Maryland. And once a month, we would go down for their symposiums. And so we were driving down in September and I was driving the first half. And Halfway through, we go to the pit stop. I'm in the bathroom. He gets in the driver's side and realizes that the receipt for the ring is face up in the driver's side door. And I had
Oh
no idea. I didn't look at all. If it was that, and then he was being really particular about his hair and what he was wearing for the shoot. And he's never been like that for any of the styled
Yeah.
shoots. He just trusted me. So when he's like, "Are you sure you like this? Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, like, why are you acting like this?" And it never crossed my mind. So he
Yeah.
was lucky that I didn't pay attention.
I hear that all the time from people when I ask them like their engagement story and stuff. It's a conversation that I love having with my brides all the time and stuff. Like, oh, how did he propose? I love hearing people's stories.
Right.
And I think so many times like the guys are so worried that the women are going to figure it out and they try and be so sneaky about it. And 99% of the time, it's like it's not even on our radar. Like we're not even thinking about it. We're like, what are you talking about right now? What
It's
are
like
you doing?
I think about it at one point, but then it doesn't happen. So it's just like I'm just not going to think about it because it didn't happen when I thought it would. So that way it's more of a surprise that way.
Yeah, I have one client who came in and she's like, I know he's proposing. He put together a photo shoot for our 1-year anniversary of dating. She's like, so I told him I'm going to go get my hair and makeup done for the photos. She's like, I know he's proposing today. She's like, I know it. And then she texted me when she, got home from the thing and she's like, oh yeah, he proposed. So I was like, yay. I was like, hair's got to be perfect today. Makeup's got to be perfect today. Yeah. And it was funny. And then I ended up doing her wedding and everything. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Sometimes we get it. Sometimes we don't.
Right.
Now that you are in wedding planning mode, first of all, when's the big day?
May 25th of 2024.
Gotcha. So not too far out now. Awesome. How has the wedding planning process been like now being a wedding vendor yourself?
It's funny because I thought I knew not all of the ins and outs of wedding planning, but I didn't realize the stress that comes from it. And like, there is a lot more to wedding planning than what I thought there was. Even as a vendor, I thought, oh, this is gonna be easy because like I, already know how to do this, or I know, vendors look for this kind of thing or whatever. But then I'm like, oh, okay, this is a lot more labor intensive than I thought.
Yeah. And I think anybody who's not in the wedding industry also feels like, oh, okay. Like I feel like a lot of people think that it's so much easier because vendors make the process look so much easier online. Like, how they say, oh, what people post is not real or whatever. It's just the highlight reel and all that kind of stuff. And people are like, there's so many, resources and everybody makes it look like it just all comes together. And then they get in the thick of it and they're like, oh my God, this is kind of overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. And we're really lucky because we are not having like a wedding. We're getting married out of state with just immediate family. So
nice.
Up to 20, 25 people. So that has made it a lot less stressful, but definitely we were hiring vendors and just I think it's really just figuring out what you want and kind of compromising if you guys have two different ideas or anything like that. That's where that, I guess, conflict comes in, that stress. But the actual planning part, we're very fortunate not, again, to have a small wedding, but also having a chip in both financially and physically helping with the wedding too. So we're very fortunate with that.
Now, has being a bride yourself kind of like raised your level of empathy for what brides are juggling? Has it shifted your perspective that way?
Oh, 1,000%. And it definitely, and I even wrote down a few things that I've changed in my business because of it.
Perfect,
because I'm like,
that's going to be my next question.
Perfect. Because I was like, oh my God, okay, now I understand my brides ask this question or do this or think this or say this. And now I want to change my business because now I understand how these brides feel. I'm a very empathetic person. Like I feed off of people's energy and their emotions. And I always try to put myself in other people's shoes. So finally being in this position where I'm seeing both ends of the spectrum, it's given me the realization of, okay, yeah, I made my policies, my business good for myself and for my client, but I want to make it better for the client.
So what kind of changes have you made? Specifically, any changes that you made to like your systems or your workflows or any of like the back end admin kind of stuff? Have you made changes to that process?
That was like pretty much all of what I changed in regards to my business when we did get engaged and as we were planning our wedding. So the first thing that I did was I displayed and itemized my pricing on my website. any bride who is listening to this understands the struggle and the frustration of finding a vendor you really love, no matter who it is, and you go to try to find at least a starting price to even make sure you can reach out and essentially not waste time reaching out, not knowing what
Mm-hmm.
the price is and not being able to find anything. So after doing that, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to itemize my pricing, because when it comes to makeup, there are some brides out there who are having their bridesmaids pay for their own hair and makeup. You want to make sure it's in their budget, or,
Yeah.
just whatever in general. So any vendor who's listening to this, highly recommend putting at least a starting price on your website. That way brides have an understanding of, okay, this is the minimum amount that this vendor needs in order for me to book them. I'll keep them on my radar, type of thing.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that I changed.
That's been one of those things where it's like, that's a hill I'm willing to die on. I've been
Mhm.
educating people for years, and people give me so much pushback and they argue and whatever. And I'm just like, put your fucking prices out there. Like,
It's
when I was
definitely
shopping
so
for a
like,
house, I knew that there were certain neighborhoods, like, just don't go down that street because I'm going to fall in love with that house. And there's
right.
no way I can afford that. And it doesn't matter how amazing you are as a person or whatever. If
Mhm.
somebody just doesn't have the money or doesn't see the value in that service and
Right.
in that price range, you can't talk people into it. And if you do, then it just feels salesy, and it just
Yes.
feels just icky. And
It
you don't
feels
want
pushy.
people coming to you from a place of that. So like, just put your prices out there and let people know, like, okay, if it's on the border, they'll decide whether or not it's important enough to them to be like, look, this is a little bit out of my price range, but I really like this person's stuff. Let me at least have a conversation. And then you're putting the ball in their court.
Yeah. I used to be that person that was like, I don't want to display my pricing because I want to be the one to essentially sell my services, which is obviously what us vendors do. But after getting engaged, I I was looking at vendors' websites and stuff, and it feels like the same song and dance when you're looking at vendors' websites, because it's they're trying to push their services, things like that, and it all boils down to the cost. It truly does, and that's it sucks because you try your best to promote the service, and I do this, but another makeup artist doesn't do that, so this is why I'm a standout, or whatever like that. But it really does boil down to how much you cost, and if that client can afford you.
Yeah, I think pricing is one piece of the puzzle that people kind of overlook when
Mhm.
it comes to like setting yourself apart and like your branding and your USP, your unique selling proposition and stuff like that. They don't necessarily correlate the two, and they're just like, well, here's what I do, and then I'm going to set my price. And then they forget that, like, okay, you still need to figure out who your target market is. And if
Right.
you're marketing to the right person, the price is an irrelevant
Exactly.
piece, because they're already going to be like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. And this is my level of expectation of what's included and what it's going to cost and stuff like that. And so they just try and market to everybody and all brides. And then the price thing kind of comes in, and it's like, well, there's going to be a whole subset of people who are just never going to afford you. And then there's
Right.
a whole subset of people who are going to be like, that's too cheap for what I'm expecting. And they're just marketing to everybody. And then they
Yeah.
forget that it's like, no, there's this distinct correlation between like your target market and your price. If they're in alignment, then you don't have to be scared of putting your prices out there. And they'll be like, well, I don't want to scare people away. It's like, good. Why do you want to waste your time with people who don't see that link between value and what you price and like all these things? So it's like, if you weren't scared of your own prices, you wouldn't have a problem with putting it up there. And if it tells me that if people are scared to put their prices up there, then they don't actually believe in what they're charging, and they need to do a little bit more like deep work. Because like you said, like brides, they need to at least know an idea. They need to know, like, okay, I can't just magically make more money appear. I need to know what this is going to cost. Is this person worth investing my time into? Because I'm sure there's so many moving parts and there's so many vendors, and it takes a lot of time just with emailing back and forth. Like, we think as wedding vendors, like, oh, we spend so much time, all these emails. It's like, yeah, each bride has that times 10, 15 different vendors
However
that
many
they're
vendors,
doing.
yeah. Yeah, and even like you said, the back and forth, displaying your prices on your website takes away basically half of the work, because
Mm-hmm.
brides will reach out if you don't have the prices listed, and they will say, I'm just wanting to know what your pricing is because
Mm-hmm.
it's not listed on your website. They know everything else, just not your pricing. So when you hit them with that sticker shock, they're going to be like, okay, I essentially wasted my time looking at this website and
Mm-hmm.
emailing. So it also takes away that awkwardness of being like, yeah, sorry, I can't book you because I can't afford you. Because a lot of people, they don't want to say no to something like that. They don't want the vendor to feel offended, which we don't. We're not offended if you can't afford our prices, and that's okay. So it takes away that awkwardness and that gray area of being like, hey, yeah, these are my prices. Okay, yeah, I can't afford you after all the work that I did looking at your website. So
Exactly. And then people, I think that's why a lot of people end up ghosting too, is because they
Mm.
don't want to have those awkward conversations
Yeah.
where, they were just like, I don't want to hurt this person's feelings and tell them no because they were really nice. And we don't want to be like, oh yeah, you suck. And it's like, no matter how much we say, oh, it doesn't offend us, like it does hurt a little bit inside where it's like, oh, why didn't they pick me? And so brides are like, I'm just going to avoid that whole conversation and just be like, I'm
Right.
just
And,
not even
I
going to
don't blame
respond.
them. I am not confrontational at all. So I don't blame brides when they feel uncomfortable talking about that. But me, it's funny because I'm not confrontational, but I want people to be confrontational with me because I want that
Yeah,
honesty. I want brides to be like, hey, I love your work, but unfortunately it's not in the budget. Or, hey, I love your work. It's not my budget, but I'm willing to work within it. What can we do in order for me to still have you as my makeup artist? That kind of thing.
exactly.
So I love when brides also do that way, because that shows that they really do want to work with you.
Yeah.
So giving that starting price or even itemized pricing if you can, it helps brides so much and it will help you to help them.
Yeah. And even if you have, like you mentioned, the itemized, it's like, even if you have, this is what the makeup is, like we all know that sometimes it's going to add up and there's little things that they don't necessarily think of. So they may be looking at, okay, well, this is what it's going to cost. And that's like the base price. But then they factor in I'll need additional artists or early start times or all these extra travel fees and all these other things that kind of make it all add up. And then they're like, oh, I didn't even realize that all of those other things came with it. And now it's kind of like, oh,
Right, right.
yeah.
So, I mean, when it comes to at least makeup, I can only obviously speak on behalf of makeup. I
Uh-huh.
felt like itemized pricing was the easiest because when you compare even 3, 4, 5 different makeup artists, even in one area, they're
Mm-hmm.
all going to have different pricing structures. Some of them might have lashes included. Some of them might have lashes added on for 10, 15, $20. Some of them have airbrush included. Some of them don't. And it's an add-on kind of thing. So because every makeup artist and every hairstylist is so different with how they structure their pricing and how much they decide, I felt like itemized pricing was a good way to be transparent with brides and be like, this is how much
Exactly.
this is going to cost. I don't think this needs to be an add-on. So this is just already included because I know people are going to want lashes after they see everyone else have them kind of thing. So
Uh-huh.
itemized pricing I felt was the best option to go for as far as displaying it on the website.
What other changes did you make? So you added your prices to your website. What else?
Another thing that I had changed was the time that I follow up with brides.
Okay.
And this was something that at first I was like, do I need to change this? Because I want to keep the communication. I'm really big on communication within my business and just in my personal life in general. So before I would follow up like the day after I sent a quote and just be like, hey, did you see the $1,000 that I told you that you'd have to pay yesterday? Did you see that email kind of thing? Just let me know if you want to book like right now. I was
Uh-huh.
so eager, but after again getting engaged and hiring my own vendors, I realized, okay, I don't need all these follow-ups right now. I just got the email. I was working when I got it and I haven't had time to
Mm-hmm.
look at the email or I was on vacation kind of thing. So I pushed my follow-up time for, I do my first follow-up usually 3 to 5 days after I send the initial email with the quote and
Uh-huh.
everything like that. Just being like, hey, just checking on you. If you have any questions about anything, don't hesitate to let me know. I try not to sound or be pushy at all in the follow up. I really just want it to be like, hey, I'm here to help. I sent you
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. If you have any questions, if you want to hop on a phone call, I'm more than happy to do that. And then I will follow up like a week after. And if I don't hear anything, I'm just going to archive it and move on to the next inquiry.
Yeah.
So the follow-up time was something that I changed. One of the first things I did, because I was like, okay, now I understand how it feels getting 5 follow-up emails in one day after emailing 5 different photographers.
I think everybody kind of has like that same standard process of like, you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm gonna look for photographers today. And like you said, you email like 5 people, and then that 3-day mark, suddenly everybody's following back up, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is kind of overwhelming. I just had this conversation at I don't know if they have like a Rising Tide Society near you, and they do like Tuesdays together.
Okay.
So they have they have chapters all over the US, and one of them is like really local to me. And we meet like one Tuesday a month, and we talk about, it's like a bunch of different wedding planners
Awesome.
or wedding vendors. And we talk about different things. And we were talking about communication, and I was like, my niece just got married, a few weeks ago. And the week of the wedding, I was texting her and being like, hey, can't wait to see you this weekend. How's everything going or whatever? And she's just like, everybody is reaching out to me right now. Everybody needs my attention. Everybody needs my time right now. And it's so overwhelming. And I was like, oh, that's how it usually goes the last week of the wedding. But it made me kind of like think, and it was one of the things that kind of inspired, this topic for the podcast. Everybody kind of reaches out at like standard points. And it's like the 30-day mark, suddenly everybody's trying to like finalize everything. And then I know that a lot of like hair and makeup people, because I see it in like Facebook groups, and they're just like, I can't write my timeline because the photographer doesn't do it until 30 days, or the planner doesn't do it until 30 days. And it's like everybody's trying to do everything at the 30-day mark.
Right.
And it's just overwhelming because the bride's being pulled in a million different directions. All the vendors are all trying to get information at the same time, but we're all waiting on each other at the same point and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, how do we shift that? Can we make a change in how we do our business so that the brides aren't being overwhelmed at the same time that everybody is trying to get information? And so like when I did mine, I always changed mine so that all of the details, like everything was like at the 45-day mark. And like once a month leading up to it, it was like, hey, quick reminder, here's when your deadline's coming up. Do you have the information now? And it's like most of the time I had all of my stuff done like 2 or 3 months beforehand. And so it was like, okay, I'm not trying to get all of her information and finalization and details and all that kind of stuff at the same time. So I think that your switch to, that 3 to 5 day thing instead of trying to follow up like right after is really spot on for that reason. Because if you're flooding her inbox at the same time as everybody else, you're not necessarily going to get all of her attention right away.
Right. And I even because I always also try to figure out what vendors they have when they book. That way, okay, I know that I've worked with this planner before. I know their deadlines for these specific things. Same thing with this kind of photographer. And now for my future brides, like for 2024 and ongoing, I'm going to probably start doing a mock timeline when we have our trial, which I choose like 1 to 2 months beforehand. That way, everyone who says they want makeup, they've been confirmed or not. The time that photographer needs to start photos is confirmed. Location is usually confirmed. That way, we're here. We did your trial. Let's go ahead and make your timeline. That way, it's already taken care of. We're sitting here, right now, type of thing. That way, you don't have to go back and forth and email. Oh, hey, can we actually change this? Can we do that? Everything is done at one time if we can.
Yeah, that's the way I always tried to do things too. And I know that my brides always talked about how they were like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that it's like, we did this at like the 4-month mark or the 3-month mark or whatever. And we're not trying to do it all in the last like 45 or 30 days or whatever. And they were like, oh, it's nice having that one thing off my plate now.
I'm very type A, and I feel like I'm the type of person where it's like, I want want my future self to think the past me. So if I can get as many things I possibly can for my client done before the 30 days, the timeline and confirming the additional artist and all of that, if the final payment can be taken care of before then, I want it to be as easy as possible for them because it's going to be easy for us too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Have you made any changes to like client facing interactions? Like I know that you had mentioned, in your post or whatever about the consultation calls and like making sure that you guys are a good fit and talking on the phone, and how much that as a bride helped to like ease your concerns about working with that person. Have you made any other types of changes along those lines?
Yeah. So I've been doing consult calls for, I want to say, a little over 2 years now, and I've always loved them. I'm a big extrovert, and my mom always told me growing up, if you're going to have important conversations, have them face to face or over the phone. And I felt like talking to one of your potential wedding vendors, someone who's going to be doing your makeup on your face for your wedding day, is a really
Mm-hmm.
important conversation to have. And
Yeah.
so after I got engaged, I was like, okay, I have to only do phone consults when people inquire. And I thought that was like the best thing. I thought that made me stand out from the crowd because I'm taking time to physically talk to my clients, whether it be over Zoom or on the phone. But as time went on, and again, this was after I got engaged too, even with vendors I was inquiring with for my own wedding, I was like, I don't have the time for these, or like the time that we were available, it just wouldn't have worked with their schedule, kind of thing. And also a lot of the phone calls, because it would be the first interaction with these vendors, it would feel very salesy. They would talk about their services, why you should be hiring me for your, videographer, whoever it is. And this is what makes me stand out, kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, I kind of heard all this on your website when I read it, and like I booked this call with you, kind of thing. I have my own questions to ask, kind of thing. So after that, now I just, again, send one email, and it has the price, it has it all itemized, everything like that. But it also includes some information that I have listed on my website, like this is what you can expect from me. This is a couple of additions that come along with hiring me. If you have any specific questions, if you want to hop on a phone call, just let me know. I'm always down to have a phone call with my clients, because if they have specific things they want to ask or have clarification on, I want it to be over the phone. I want to extend that to them, because I also have clients who, are nurses or they're lawyers. So they don't have time during the day to have these phone calls. Like I would have clients literally leaving work, and they're like, "Hey, sorry, I just got from work. I'm in the phone. I'm in the car," kind of thing. So it's like it made it awkward requiring it, because I don't have the same set schedule as my clients do, and I didn't want to sound salesy the first interaction we have one-on-one, again over the phone or over Zoom. So having the email first and then offering a phone call follow-up if they wish to have one was the easiest transition that I did.
Any other changes that you made to your business since becoming a bride-to-be?
But the last one that I did change that I can remember is extending the proposal time. So whenever I sent the proposal of services, at first it was like, I think only gave like 2 or 3 days for people to sign and pay. But now I extended it to a week. And the reason is because, again, we're very fortunate to have family that is helping financially with the wedding. And because you have that third party involved now, you have 3 schedules to worry about. And, if I send this proposal, and if their mom is helping with the wedding, her mom might have to transfer money into the account, or might have to wait for the paycheck to come on Friday, kind of thing. So that's why I extended that, because I know people have different schedules. They also might have a lawyer that they want to have look over the contract, or their planner, make sure everything is, everything's good. So that's another thing that I changed too.
I hear a lot of people complain. They'll be like, oh, like if I found somebody that I really loved, I wouldn't want to risk them, booking somebody else. I would get back to them right away. And I think that a lot of times we forget that, like, yeah, but they still have work. They still have a life, they still have, like you said, if somebody else is paying, then they have multiple schedules, or if they want to send it to their wedding planner and they just want to, like, it's a big financial commitment to book a vendor for a wedding. And people really need to sometimes sit with that decision. And I think trying to push people to hurry up and get back to you right away can feel like, like when you go to buy a car and you're sitting there in the sales room and they're like, just a second, let me go talk to my manager real quick. And you're like, you're probably going to go pee. Like you're going to, you're going to get yourself a cup of coffee. You're not talking to your manager. It's a sales tactic to like add urgency, and, and you're just sitting there and you're at the point where you're like, I've been here for 6 hours. I just want to buy my fucking car and go home. I'm done with this. So you're willing to kind of just accept anything and just be like, okay, let's
Right.
just get this over and let's get this
We're gonna
done with.
settle for this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that like sometimes we need to remember that urgency is good because we want them to get it done quickly so that we're not holding on to a date and then we get other inquiries. Like we know that we're getting all these other inquiries and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's juggling and it's managing that for ourselves. But at the same time, it's like, that doesn't matter to brides. Like
Right.
they still have to make their decision when they feel good about it. And if people are excited about working with you, that's going to be the motivation. We don't need to like push too much urgency on people. Like let people do it when they're ready. And if they're not ready, then move it along. Like we need to have our system and our process in place where it's like, okay, it feels good to everybody. And if it didn't feel good in the moment, then we're not sitting there being like, oh my God, we missed out.
Totally.
We can move it along kind of thing.
Yeah. And something, and like I said earlier, I'm a big empath and I try to put myself in other people's shoes. And we all know as vendors, if we can help our clients do their, I say, job as the bride or whatever, it's going to make our job a whole lot easier. It's a domino effect. It's a two-way street. So if we can make the client's life easier, it's going to make our job a whole lot easier. And something that I've even implemented too, as far as like the inquiry process and the, extending everything. One I have in my inquiry form at the last question is, how far along in the process are you in booking your makeup artist? How quickly are you wanting to? And I have 3 options. It's, I want to book as soon as possible. I'm still looking at my options, weighing everything. I'll need a couple weeks. And I just started my search. I'm going to need plenty of time. So one, that gives me enough information to know, okay, if this person is still weighing their options, I'm not going to follow up in 3 to 5 days. I'm going to follow up in a week because they still are, they're still inquiring. They're still getting quotes from people, and it may not be the same day. It could be, they might get a quote in 5 days. So they still have to weigh their options. And then 2, I sometimes also like to ask, when would you like for me to reach out and follow up based on your schedule? Because again, I have nurses and I have lawyers and I have clients who are moms and, they have to pick their kids up from daycare and they have to, feed their families. So they may not have time to answer your email 2 days after you send it. You know what I mean? So also putting that in the client's shoes and putting the ball in their court, essentially. When would you like me to follow up? I'll put a reminder on my calendar. Hey, just following up, just circling back to your inquiry on the day that you asked. How is everything going? What can I help with, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Making the client's life easier, it's going to give you a leg up because it shows that you care about them as a person, not just someone who's going to pay for your services.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have like a email template kind of thing that it's one of the resources that I have in my coaching business and stuff like that. And one of the things that I have in there is put on your inquiry form, ask them where in the process they are, and then tailor your first response based on that. Like if there's somebody who's just starting out, what information do they need to know at the beginning of their search? Put that information, highlight that in your first email. And then, like you said, it lets you know, like, don't be following up right away because they're still searching. They've got a ton of responses that are coming into their inbox right now. They're still sorting through all of those kinds of things. So I think you're right on the money there with asking that question. It's so important to understand, what is their thought process right now? How motivated are they right now? What else are they juggling in their wedding planning process right now? How can I make their life easier? What obstacles can I remove to help facilitate the flow of their client journey from inquiry to booked? What obstacles can I remove? What information do they need at this point? Because people need different pieces of information at different points in their buying process. If I'm walking past a store and I see a sign saying that they have a sale, okay, that's going to get me in the door. But now once I'm in the store, all right, what am I looking for? Some people are going to be looking for different things. So we kind of can keep that in mind with our email communication. Like, what do people need to know at this point? How can I make this easier on them? Because then it makes it easier on us because we're not having to do so many follow-ups. We're not having to answer so many questions. And the client feels like, oh my God, it's like she read my mind. She knew what I needed. She gave it to me. And it's like, that's what really, I think, shows that somebody is a professional and
Mhm.
not just they're really good at doing makeup. You know, like, because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm really good at doing makeup. I'm going to do this and I'm going to be a professional. It's like, there's another piece of the puzzle there. Like,
It's
what sets
10%
us
makeup,
apart?
90% business and communications. And, something else too that I changed as well that made me think about this is
Uh-huh.
when I send the proposal, I always make sure to like look at the total. I'm like, okay, I feel like I need to add like in a way like a payment plan for this. So
Uh-huh.
instead of 50% of this much, because I do 50% down for my retainer,
Uh-huh.
sometimes I'm like, okay, that's a lot of money. Like that looks like one whole paycheck because makeup is not cheap anymore. Like
No,
the makeup
really not.
prices for weddings right now, you're not going to find 2015 prices today. So I know how much makeup costs and I know it can be expensive. So I'm like, okay, let me see again, how can I make the client's life easier? Let's do
Mm-hmm.
a payment plan. You can pay this much now, this much 6 or 8 months before the wedding, depending on how close we are, and then this much the month before. That way you don't have to put an entire paycheck down in one day to secure a makeup artist or whatever vendor it is. So having a payment plan too also helps ease that sticker shock of, oh god, okay, I have to put that much money down.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now I could do a payment plan and have increments due throughout the process, and that way you can also do follow-ups. Hey, how are we doing? I know your final or your next payment is coming up. Is there anything else I can help with? Is there anything that's been updated that we need to add on or anything like that while we're here?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. There's another artist that I've talked to who does a payment plan system like that, but I think she breaks
Mhm.
it up into like 12 payments. So it's like 12 monthly payments or whatever if they booked out a year in advance. And then
Mhm.
she says that she puts like all of her brides on that payment plan, and so every single month she guarantees that she knows how much income she has coming in that month based on like what's already been booked. And I was like, that's a really
That
fabulous
is a
concept.
smart
That's really
because there are months that,
interesting.
like, especially in the slow season, I'm like, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage this month? Like, there have been months where I'm like, babe, I'm not making anything. Like, and then
Yeah.
I'll have a month and the next month, and I'm like, oh my god, like, where did all this come from? Kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, that the instability that would definitely the payment plan has definitely helped instability in like the slow months because oh,
Uh-huh.
okay, cool, their wedding is in 6 months. Their 6 month payment is coming up and it's January. So I know I'll have some cash this month.
Yeah. Like I like to educate people to have not necessarily like payment plans like that, but to like figure out like when is slow time, can we get more retainers during slow time? And it's like if
Right.
we're not doing the weddings and like how can we like take a look at our busy season and our slow time and what can we work on in different times of our business to still be like, okay, now that it's slow time, I'm getting some retainers, but maybe I can like have a bunch of my trials come in during
Right.
like January, February, March for everybody that's going to happen in like April, May, or June kind of
Right.
thing. And be like, okay, if you're always looking at, okay, trials are done around that 3-month mark or 4-month mark. Okay, now is when we're going to work on all that scheduling. So you're not kind of like, oh
Right.
my God, this person's wedding is in a month and we never did the trial or whatever. And you're kind of like, okay, what can I focus on right now that's still, bringing in some income and stuff like that and helping to like manage those ups and downs and all that kind of
Totally.
stuff. All right, so let's kind of shift a little bit here. I have a couple questions for you about, just being an artist in the industry.
For sure.
If you could go back in time and tell baby artist Carly, just starting out, what piece of advice would you give to her?
This is not an all sunshine and rainbows and butterflies. Yeah, you get to do makeup for a living and go home type of job. No, like I mentioned earlier, it is 10% makeup, 90% business. And if you
Mm-hmm.
are going to own a business, you need to be a business owner. You need to run the business. And
Mm-hmm.
also, it's okay to outsource. You don't have to wear all the 20 hats that entrepreneurs wear. If you want to outsource an accountant and an attorney and a brand designer
Mm-hmm.
and a virtual assistant, if you have the money for it, go for it. If you want to make your life easier as a business owner and
Mm-hmm.
it still benefits you and your clients, go for it. But yeah, you're going to have to run a business. It's not all sunshines and rainbows, but you don't have to do it alone. You can outsource. It's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm to the point in my coaching business where I'm like, okay, I'm done for the last 3 years wearing all the hats. It is time to outsource and to hire. Like when we are done having this conversation today and I download the videos and whatnot, it's getting sent off to a video editor. I'm like, I am done trying to find YouTube tutorials to figure out how to edit my videos and like all these kinds of things. Like that's not my area of genius. Like I'm really good at doing hair. I'm really good at doing makeup, and I'm really, really good at like business and coaching. And like, that's why I want to be a business coach. Cause like you said, like it's 90% business, and there's only so many people out there that focus on educating strictly about the business side of things. So I'm like, that's what I'm really good at.
Yeah.
I need to just learn to let it go and send it out to other people and just be like, okay, this is your area of genius. This is what you're really good at. I'm going to let you shine in your area of genius that makes my life easier, and I can focus on what I do really well for my clients.
Yes. And something, because this made me think of another thing too. You're not going to know what you want, and you're not going to figure out what you are really, really good at right away. You have to fail. You have to make mistakes in order to succeed. Fail. And I saw even a quote yesterday. I think it was like, failure is not the enemy of success. It's part of it, or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but it's
I
true.
love that. Yeah.
I know. And so, I'm 8 years in, granted I've been only freelancing for about 3 years now, 2-3 years. So I'm still in that like beginning stages of freelancing. So I'm still learning as I'm going. I'm making my own mistakes and I'm failing in certain things, but that's just showing me, okay, that's not my expertise, but I'm finding passion, or I'm finding that I have skill in this type of path. I'm going to go into this and see what I can do. And that can open up so many doors. So don't be afraid to say yes to things, because you never know, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this, or I didn't enjoy that as much as I thought I would. I'm going to do this instead, kind of thing. It can open doors, and it can ignite a passion that you're like, I didn't even know I had this skill or this interest in this.
Yeah, I felt like that about photography. When I first started as a makeup artist, I would do like a lot of photo shoots and stuff like that. And I would see how I did the makeup and then how the photos came back. And I was like, I need to learn a little bit more about photography. So when I walk in on a set, I can look at the light setup and I can see, okay, this is how I'm going to need to adjust my makeup so that it photographs the way that I want it to. And the same thing with like wedding photography and stuff like that. There are some photographers that will do like the super light and airy. And it's like, okay, how do I need to adjust how I do my makeup so that it shows up in photos and it looks good? Because I'm one of those artists who's like very anti makeup has to be super heavy to show up in photos. Like I hate that philosophy because it's like, no, you just have to understand how the photographer edits their stuff and you can make adjustments. And again, that's another thing that like sets you apart from somebody who's just doing good at makeup or they're good at doing makeup. They can go to the mall or they can go to Ulta or somebody like that and they can find somebody. We're good at the business too and understanding, well, this is how the changes I need to make affect my end result. So learning about photography and learning about editing and being like, okay, this photographer, they're the person that you're hiring for your wedding. This is how I need to shift how the makeup is going to look in person so that it shows up in photos well. And how do I articulate that to my client? And then there's people who have like the dark and moody, where it's like you put baby pink lipstick on and you get the photos back and you're like, what the fuck? Why do they look like they have red lipstick on? Because they edit that and they bump up the saturation and it's like, okay, I can't do heavy contouring on that person, or I have to be really conscious of the colors of bronzers and other things that I put on so it doesn't look muddy or it doesn't look orange and things like that. And it's like, okay, I had to learn all of those things. And then I found I had this like really big passion for photography. And it's one of the things that I have like masterclasses and things that I've created as a business coach where it's like, okay, here's how to take better photos of your work. Here's how to understand lighting. Here's how to do editing. And I teach people like, here's how to use Lightroom on your phone. And here's different presets and how they make the photo look different and all that kind of stuff. Because I went out there and was like, okay, what do I not do so good at? Let me at least educate myself about it and find out, is this something that I can do myself, or is this something that I need to hire somebody else to do? And I found this passion for photography for like the last 10 years. Like I went out and spent like thousands on like a professional camera, and I had all of these lenses, and I have like a full studio set up and everything in my home. And now my niece has become a photographer, and because she would come and visit during the summer, and I would take her to styled shoots with me, and I would bring my camera, and she just fell in love with it. And now she's 25, and she's like trying to become a wedding photographer and stuff now. So I like gave her all of my old photography equipment. I'm like, here, I don't use this anymore. Like maybe you can use this for your business and take some photos and find maybe is this your passion too. So it was a cool journey for me to be like, all right, I learned about this, and now I've learned, okay, this is a fun hobby. Like this is cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think too, this is opening up another tip I have from earlier, because at first it's like, man, like this can sound really overwhelming to newer makeup artists who are listening to this. Like, oh my God, I need to know about this. I need to know about that. Yeah, you do in a way, if you want the makeup to look good, both in person and in photos, and you want your client to be happy, but it takes time. You don't have to know every single thing when you first start, because no one does. No one does. So if there's any new beginner aspiring makeup artist listening to this and they're like, oh my God, I need to do all the things all at once. No, you don't. We did not know everything that we first started. I still don't know everything that I'm going to know that as I continue on in my career. It's okay to keep learning. That's the whole point of this career, is you keep learning, you keep pushing yourself to do better for you and for your clients.
Absolutely. I think that we should always just be forever students in some way. Absolutely. Always learning something. Like in my shift in my career, it's like, okay, what new things can I learn? Like I went and I learned about like video editing and things like that, and was like, cool, not my thing. But at least I was open to like, all right, this is a piece of my job that, I don't know about. Instead of saying, well, I'm not interested in learning about that, I was like, okay, well, at least let me learn about it. Can this help me do my job better? And I think that if people just at least approach that and be like, okay, here's a bunch of different topics and different things that I could learn about, at least have your mind open to it and just be like, okay, I don't have to learn everything. I don't have to learn everything all at once, but let me keep my mind open and be like, okay, if I learn about this is how it could impact my career for the better. And just be open to being like, okay, let me listen. Let me find out. And if it's not something that I'm passionate about, if it's not something that interests me, I don't have to go any farther then.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think too, being open-minded and even going as far as contacting photographers or planners in your area and being like, hey, when you're doing next time you do a styled shoot or a client shoot, can I shadow and see how you photograph and see how you use light, or, with planners, how you correlate the schedule and how you do things? Because not only is one that going to make you a better business owner because you're, again, absorbing all of this information, but it's going to make you a better business owner for your clients. And that's going to show your clients that you're putting in the work to learn not just about your craft, but other people's craft, that it all correlates. It's all connected in some way. So going out of your comfort zone to go into these other parts of the industries and all these other specialties, it shows that I'm here to learn. I'm here to be better at what I am for myself, for my clients, and provide a better product and service for them.
Yeah. And two, also, I think it fosters really good relationships with other people in, the wedding industry, where they're like, oh, cool, you're interested in my job here, and then they know you as the person who's like, yeah, she actually, took the time to learn how her job interacts with my job and how we can make it easier for one another. Like I did that on a lot of styled shoots with photographers where I was like, okay, I'm done with the hair and makeup. I'm not going to bounce. I'm going to stick around and watch and learn and be like, okay, this is what you do. This is what you need. What can I do on my piece of the job beforehand? Because we set up so much of how things are going to happen the rest of the day. What can I do to make your job easier? And they were like, cool, I appreciate that. What can I do to make your job easier too? And then it was just like, it all just kind of snowballed from there into like really understanding people a lot better and making little tiny tweaks. Like becoming a bride has shifted your perspective and you've made tweaks and things like that. Learning about other facets of the industry, what do planners do, what do photographers do, those kinds of things. How can I make their job easier so my client experience at the end of the day, like kind of bringing it all together with the topic of today's conversation is how can I make these changes that make the client experience better overall? How can I be a better business owner for my clients? Yeah, so definitely I think those conversations are so important.
Yes. And they will also, this is a referral based industry, not just from client to client, but from vendor to client. If you go out of your way to make relationships with vendors, you're going to be on the referral list because not only are they great at makeup, but they're really good at their interpersonal skills. They're really good at making you feel like a person, not just someone who wants to pay for your services type of thing. They want to understand you and your wedding and your expectations, your wants and your needs. I'm going to refer them because they understand everything about makeup and more.
Absolutely. All right, one more quick question. If you were to listen to today's episode again 1 year from now, what do you want to remind future Carly?
Oh, that's a good question. I think going back to the whole learning thing, I find myself always getting stuck in this imposter syndrome state where it's like, oh, they want me to be their wedding makeup artist, or oh, they want me on their podcast kind of thing. So I still get that in that weird state, and I get kind of stagnant because I'm afraid to go further because I'm like, oh, like, oh no. But yeah, so future Carly, if you're listening to this, keep going. I'm really excited to see where you are in the future and what you're doing, and how you're going. But yeah, like just keep going, keep learning, say yes to things that feel uncomfortable because you never know what doors they could open, what people you meet, what opportunities you can have.
Awesome. I love it. The last question that I like to leave my guests with, we chatted about this in an email beforehand, is horror stories. Not every wedding interaction is going to go perfectly. And I think sometimes as artists, we get in our head when we have a less than stellar thing and we're like, we jump onto Facebook and like, please tell me where I'm not alone. This has happened to somebody else before too. So do you have a horror story that you want to share that you think that other artists can benefit from?
It's funny because, and I'm going to knock on wood here, that I've been very fortunate that in the years that I've been doing wedding makeup, that I have not had a horror story to where it's like, I need to go to Facebook and vent about this because I have no idea what's going on kind of thing. So I'm very fortunate that I have yet to have that kind of experience, but I've definitely had experiences where I'm like, I don't know what to do right now, or I don't know how to go forward. The one that sticks out in my head it was when I was still working. I can't remember if I was working my salon job or I was in my 9 to 5. I can't remember, but at the time, makeup was not my full-time job yet. And I also didn't have a studio. So I was still mobile, going to people's homes, and I was doing a trial for a bride. And this was before I enforced my trials after people booked. So I was doing a trial before this bride booked, and she also wanted her mom to have a trial as well, which I understood, especially because the mom had a skin condition called vitiligo, where it affects the pigment in the skin. And so I was like, yeah, empathetic about it. Let's do it. Let's see what we can do. And we did the bride's makeup. It was great. I went on to the mom's makeup, and when I showed her the mirror, she laughed, and I was like, I've never gotten that reply before.
Oh,
like,
no.
what do I do? She's laughing. And I'm like, do you like it? And she goes, yeah. And I was like, okay. Is there anything you want to change? And like, when you work in this industry, and just me being the empath I am, again, I feed off of people's energies, and I'm really good at reading body language. So I'm like, I know she doesn't like it. I can tell just by the way she's sitting and the way she's looking in the mirror. And I took all of the information that she gave me when we were doing the consultation, like what kind of makeup do you typically wear? How would you do it on the wedding day? What do you feel comfortable with? What do you not feel comfortable with? And there were some things that I was just like, that's what I thought you said you wanted kind of thing. So, and it gave me a perspective to a point where it's like, okay, one, don't always expect clients to like the makeup when you do it, because not every client is a client for you, and you're not the makeup artist for every client. But two, ask more probing questions. don't be afraid to have like a 5-minute long consultation. Obviously, if time allows, don't rush yourself with the makeup application, but it made me like think, okay, what can I do differently so I don't get that kind of reaction now? Because I want the client to feel comfortable. I want them to feel honest, be honest about what they like and what they don't like. So if I can step back and reevaluate how I'm approaching this makeup application and create an environment where they do feel comfortable enough to be like, yeah, listen, I'm not feeling this lip color or whatever it is. That's what I try to do. So I ask more probing questions. And also, I just trying to learn not to take things personally. It's really hard when you work, especially just as a makeup artist, when this is your art. And if people don't like it, you're like, oh, you don't like what I do, kind of thing. So it's hard not to take things personally in this industry, but makeup is so personal for everyone, no matter who it is. Everyone's idea of natural or glam or whatever it is so subjective. And so approaching a makeup application with that in mind, that you have two completely different ideas of what this makeup look could look like in the end, it kind of softens the blow at the end when the client is like, I think I want to change this instead. So that's my horror story, I guess.
Gotcha. No, I mean, not everything has to be like a, oh, like horror story, but like it wasn't a perfect interaction. And what did you learn for it? It doesn't have to be a big thing that kind of like blows up in our face or something like that, to still learn. It could be a simple interaction of like, okay, what did I learn from this? What changes can I make from it? And you learned, okay, ask different questions or ask, more probing questions or whatnot, because you're so right. Makeup is so subjective. I think a lot of times hairstylists really have it a lot easier, because they just make it match the picture kind of thing. And on makeup, we know what goes into making the picture, but translating that onto somebody's face, like it can be a lot trickier. And people have different words for natural and glam and soft glam and stuff like that. It is so subjective. To one person, wearing red lipstick is like an everyday thing. Like my best friend, she wears like red lipstick and black lipstick and like dark purple and stuff like that. And I'm like, nude, pink, like really soft. And so when I put red lipstick on, I suddenly feel like so more dramatic and whatnot. And for her, it's just an everyday thing. So keeping that in mind, it's like, yeah, just because you think it looks really beautiful, and it could look really beautiful to somebody else, they may not be perceiving it that way because they're used to seeing themselves in a different way. And it doesn't mean that what you did was any less beautiful. It's just not in their comfort zone, or not what they had envisioned when they said, I want natural, or I want glam, or I want whatever.
Totally. And something that helps too is asking before the trial too. Have a picture of you with makeup that either you've done yourself or you've gotten it done and you really liked it that day. That way you can see the shades that they like of eyeshadow, the placement that they typically put their blush on, kind of thing. It's not always, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but the makeup artist isn't always right, because we're working with another person who has different preferences and ideas and a comfort level. So if you approach it to where it's like, yeah, I am the professional, I've been doing this for X amount of time and I've worked on so many people, I'm working on this one person who's maybe never gotten their makeup done before, or has gotten their makeup done before, and it's all been different results. It makes the interpersonal connection a lot better, because you're giving them that space and that opportunity for them to be like, yeah, this is how I like it, this is what I don't like. And that way you can just kind of build a look off of that.
Yeah. I always like, especially with moms, and more often so with hair, when I'm doing their hair, I'll ask them, do you have a photo of a time when you had somebody else do your hair that you felt really beautiful? And I ask them to bring that with them, because then I can see, like, did they literally just have, like, a lot of times the moms will be like, yeah, we just like kind of pulled it all off up to one side and it was like all volume up here. And I'm like, that looks like shit to me, kind of thing, like they'll just like, sometimes they want it just like so messy. And then I'm like, can we can we take that idea and make it look like a professional did it and not like you did it yourself kind of thing. But at least it gives me a starting point of that's what they liked, you know, and other times they want it like super severe. And it's like, okay, this is a photo from like 30 years ago. How can we take what they felt beautiful and what they felt comfortable with and modernize it? So asking like, what do you feel beautiful? How do you feel beautiful? Like my sister, when my niece got married a couple of weeks ago, I did her hair and makeup, and she always wears her hair down. And at first we were just going to do a half up so she felt comfortable with her hair down. And then the more she thought about it, she was just like, no, I want my hair all up. I want my hair all up. And everything I did, like no matter what, she just kept saying, I feel like I look like mom. Like every time I look in the mirror, she's like, I just feel like I look like mom, because mom always wore her hair up. Mom never wore her hair down. And my sister is like my mother's clone. So she already, it's like, you look like mom. Like you freak out Uncle Bob sometimes when he like walks into the room and he's like, whoa, because my mom passed when I was little. So it's like my mom's been gone for like 30 years now. And sometimes like my Uncle Bob will come over or like see my sister and just be like, he gets like the shivers sometimes where he's like, it's like walking in the room and seeing my sister standing there. Like she looks that much like our mom. And it's like, of course you feel like you look like mom. And all of the pictures of our mom was like when she was younger, you know, like big 60s hair kind of thing. She just kept feeling like it just feels so high. I just feel like mom. And I'm just like, you have barely any volume at all on your head. Like I'm not slicking it back into a bun in the middle of your head. And it was this kind of like argument between us back and forth with, no matter what, you're not going to feel good with your hair up. Like, because that's just not you. So at least if you are insistent on me making sure that your hair is up, can I at least do it my way that it's going to look good and it's not going to like date you in photos and stuff like that. And so that way someday your daughter or your granddaughter or whatever is like, I look like Granny in this photo, you know, like
Like I think trials are so important, because I don't like going in blind on people's wedding days, because this is a total stranger. Again, going back to the whole makeup is so subjective kind of thing. And so that's why trials are so important, because a bride will come in with this idea that she like, this is what I want, but I'm like, okay, this is pretty dramatic. Do you wear this often? Like, is this something you would realistically wear even for like a girls' night out? And they'd be like, I don't know, probably, I just want to try something new. And it's like, no, like this is your wedding day. And these are photos that you're going to look at for decades to come. Do you want to look back and think, I like wish I didn't do that? I wish I went something that I felt like more like myself. And I've had trials where they felt more ambitious with their makeup and they're like, yeah, I really want to try it. I'm like, hey, okay, this is the reason why we have a trial. Yep. So let's do it. And then they email back or whatever. And they're like, yeah, can we have a second trial? I think I want to stick with my comfort zone. And I'm like, that's totally fine. That is why we have trials. So you have an understanding of what you want for your wedding day.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in trials. Like for me in my business, it was always mandatory. Like when they paid, so I did my booking a little bit differently. Their retainer was just the trial fee when I did hair and makeup. So it was like they were prepaying for their hair and makeup, which wasn't cheap. It was like $250 each. So they were still paying like $500. And then I would hold their date, and we still had like a contract saying this date between these times for a minimum of this number of bridesmaids for hair and this many for makeup and any assistants, all those kinds of things. So it was like a condensed version of the contract saying, hey, pending the results of the trial kind of thing. And they would come in for the trial, and that way I always knew that it was guaranteed, because we didn't have a wedding day contract until after their trial. And usually that was at like 3 or 4 months beforehand. So it was like, okay, now we can talk about timeline. Now we can do all these kinds of things. I still had a financial commitment. It wasn't a huge amount that they had to pay up front. And it was like around the 3 or 4 month mark. And then they were paying the 50% of the wedding day services. So we both felt comfortable that we could like still kind of walk away at any point, but I wasn't holding a date for like no money and things like that. So it was a way for me to make trials mandatory, because it was like, no, I don't want to show up on a wedding day, and I don't know if you're going to be like my sister, who was like, I'm insisting on an updo, but then she hates updos. And it's like, now we've wasted an hour trying to do this. And no matter what I do, you're still not going to feel comfortable because it's a thing in your head. And now we don't have time to go back and like change it and stuff like that. The people who can do that and do it really well, like, man, hats off to you. Like, I couldn't do that. I am way too type A. I'm way too anxious. I'm like, no, I must know what you like already.
And that's why, like, in the trial, like, I sit down with my client at eye level and I tell them, like, listen, this is a trial. Nothing we have to do is set in stone. If you want to change your mind about something, let me know. I'm very receptive to feedback. So if at the end you're like, I'm not feeling the lip color, let's change it. That's an easy fix. If you want to change the lash, let's peel them off and try a different one, kind of thing. If you want to try a totally different look, if we have time, I got makeup remover, let's try it, kind of thing. So it's one of those things, again, where I'm trying to make the client's life easier to make our lives easier. And in turn, it just makes the whole process for both of us seamless and easy.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I have loved our conversation, and I think that it's going to be super, super valuable to everybody listening today. So thank you so much. If people want to find out more about your services or follow you, where can they find you online?
They can find me on Instagram. They can find me on TikTok. They can find me on Facebook at Carly Jo Makeup. And then my website is carlyjomakeup.com. Super simple.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you everybody for listening. I will see you back next week. Thanks again so much for listening to today's interview with Carly. It was so awesome having her on the show. And just as a reminder, in season 3 this year, it is my mission to get a review on Apple Podcasts from all 50 states in the US. So if you are listening to today's episode on Apple Podcasts or even on Spotify, but go ahead and leave me a quick review and make sure to comment where you're tuning in from. And I will go ahead and I will add you to my reviews map. I have a really fun little project that I'm working on. And like I said, it's my goal to get one from every single state in the US by June of 2024. So thank you so much for listening. Take 2 seconds. Leave me a quick review and let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you're tuning in from outside of the United States, I want to know too. I love seeing where this podcast is going to and the lives that it is helping to improve and businesses that it is helping to make better, more sustainable, and more profitable. So tell me where you're tuning in from. You can, again, leave me a review. Also, if you want to just send me a quick DM on Instagram or share today's episode to your Instagram stories and tag me, let me know where you're tuning in from. I would love to know that as well. So thank you so much, and I will see you back next week.